What is going on, Sports Wars? We're here, we're live, and it's back against the spread Monday nights. The place, at least on this side of the internet, to come for some college or NFL picks. And of course, we've got the great Robert Barnes in the house from sportspicks.locals.com. What's going on, Rob?
It's good as they say in Tennessee, it's football time in Tennessee. It's football time in America. So it's good to have it back full scale. This is the first opening week. It makes sense that it culminates with the New York Jets with the Aaron Rodgers playing at home on Monday night on September 11th. So it's has many, it's good that it's back, and I think it will be a fun and exciting year.
Yeah, obviously football is king. Obviously NFL is king. College football is the prince there when it comes to the ratings, when it comes to what people pay attention to, and they're both back. Unfortunately for you, however, if you're a Charter Spectrum customer, it might not be back for you. That was one of the biggest stories of the college football opening weekend was on Thursday night, 8 p.m. when Florida, Utah is about to kick off. I mean, maybe thankfully some Florida fans didn't have to watch that, but ABC, ESPN, everything Disney related goes dark. And it went all the way through opening weekend for college football. College football ratings were down about 44% for ESPN from week one last year. Some of that is because the second biggest cable company in the United States was not carrying ESPN, but that can't explain all of it. But that is certainly a big problem for Disney when it comes to the revenue that they're missing out from their advertisers because of this basically this dispute they have with Spectrum.
Yeah, and it just kind of came out of the blue because at least the fans I knew had no idea that it was even a risk that, you're going to have to try to, if you're in the middle of Florida, you're going to have to try to find a way to hijack the live stream for the game. And because otherwise you couldn't watch it, which was, I think it's the first time that's ever happened that I know of.
You see these disputes from time to time, and I'm sure you remember, I feel like not a ton of people have or watch traditional cable anymore. Everyone's switching these streaming services, but it used to be, TNT. There's a dispute between DirecTV and Turner Cable, and if you want this on your channel list, call this number 1-800 we don't like this, whatever, right? We've seen that stuff before, but for Disney, the second biggest cable company, during what is the biggest season for them sports-wise, it is a huge problem. A lot of people hoping to get resolved soon, but I think Spectrum's sticking their foot in the ground. Disney, we talk about this a lot across a variety of channels. Disney's failing almost everywhere right now, and even with people cutting cable, they're trying to charge an outlandish amount of money to stay on linear television because the revenue's down everywhere else. And they don't want to allow people the ability to pick and choose the channels they want. They want you to have to bundle every Disney channel. And Spectrum said, no, we're not doing that because if we do that, we're doomed. We have to come to some different agreement. But fortunately, college football fans may have missed out on some interesting games. And the one game that you didn't have to watch on a Disney brand was Colorado TCU. And all the talk this offseason was Deion Sanders coming from Jackson State, going to Colorado with a one-win Colorado team, overturning like 70% of the roster, bringing a bunch of his guys there. All the talk and swagger you get from Deion, what was the result going to be? And holy shit, they delivered.
I mean, almost 21-point underdogs to the former defending team that appeared in the national championship last year, and Sonny Dykes Horned Frogs at TCU having to play in a very hot weather environment there in August in Texas. And they go in, and not only do they pull the outright upset as massive underdogs, first win by Colorado over a top 10 team in more than 20 years, but he does it in style. He does it with one of the most exciting, most engaging, fun games all year long. He does it with a player that's a Heisman candidate, the number one prospect that he got out of high school to go to Jackson State and transfer with him, Travis Hunter, who played an extraordinary 144 snaps on both sides of the ball and on special teams. It was insane. I mean, Champ Bailey did a little bit of that, but I don't think he ever got to 144 snaps in any game. And then, of course, his son, the quarterback, his other son, the safety, both played well. They disguised their vulnerabilities enough to get by, and they made big. I mean, Sanders threw for more yards than he ever did at Jackson State, and he broke a Colorado record in the process.
Yeah.
said he was going to be, Coach Prime. He was, we're back, we're coming. And I think the biggest thing he reflects and reveals is what's changing all of college football. Aside from all the crazy conference realignments, this is the last year Colorado will be in the Pac-12. Is the only year Deion will be coaching in it as they shift to the Big 12, as the Pac-12 becomes the Pac-2. Is the transfer portal. Is and a lot of people criticize them for first thing he does when he shows up on campus is tell everybody, most of you guys suck and you should just go transfer somewhere else. But what he did by drawing all the notoriety and attention to that speech was players all across the country said, golly gee, I can play right away at Colorado because they're scratching their entire roster. And so, I think the second most transfers in the country was 24, something like that. He brought in, I think 70. I mean, it was crazy.
A lot of players. And
revolution. He showed, here's what you can do with the transfer portal. You can radically reshape your entire roster. You can take the worst team and arguably all of college football, definitely the Power 5, a team that from a power rating perspective was 30 points worse than average. In other words, they would rank towards the bottom of the MAC in power ratings. That's how bad and atrocious Colorado was last year. And they go in and upset the team that was playing for the national championship on their home turf in their very first outing. Now, great coordinator hires, especially on the offensive side of the ball. Former Kent State head coach is one of the most creative, most fun coaches in the country. Sanders realized his talent, went out and grabbed him, brought in some of his offensive linemen that could adjust well enough. Their front seven defensively has a lot missing, but they have a lot of talent in the secondary, a lot of talent at the skill positions, and they're probably going to have a lot of fun, engaging games this year. And credit to Coach Prime. He used what was available to him to revolutionize Colorado football in a single season.
It's wild. And obviously, not the average coach is not going to be able to go into a program and do this. This is Deion Sanders. This is Prime. This is the swagger. This is what he brings. And when you come into Colorado, you talk that big game, people are going to flock to him. This guy is a legend. This is one of the best to ever do it. And he's got all of the swagger associated with that. So you know that not only, are you playing for Deion, but you're playing for a Deion Sanders who's going to get all the attention from the press. Like Colorado's constantly going to be in the headlines. They're constantly going to get in games they wouldn't before. So that's so much incentive for young guys who want to be stars, who think they have what it takes to go there and get that kind of exposure. And we weren't sure what to expect. It's only one game against a TCU who lost a lot from last year, undoubtedly. But I think everybody's really impressed. And the way that that offense played and the way the defense played looks like they're ready for the Big 12 already, to be honest with you. I think they're going to fit right in whenever they get to the Big 12.
No doubt about it. I mean, it's fun that they're playing Nebraska. Nebraska now in the Big 10, Colorado now in the Big Pac-12, about to go to the Big 12. But that was a great historic matchup in the 90s between those programs, and even through up until the early 2000s. And the one thing with Colorado is they had a very underappreciated fan base. Last year when they played TCU at home, big underdogs, they cracked. I mean, one of the worst teams in college football. It was still mostly sold out with a very passionate crowd. That in Boulder, it's always been a party campus, along with Eugene, Oregon, and Madison, Wisconsin, and so it's a big football town. I mean, the Denver Broncos are revered throughout all the Rocky Mountain states. So I think he's got the fan base, he's got the donors, and now he's got a lot of public opinion on his side. So I think he will be he's turning out to be not just flash, but have some substance behind it.
Yeah, and this is a team, a university that's only, it might seem like a lot when you say 30 years removed from a national title, but in the grand scheme of things, not a ton. There's not a huge list of teams that can say that. And, they do have that, in their history. They still got fans that remember that and want to get back to those days. And Deion is giving them a lot of hope to do just that, undoubtedly. We got a super chat over on Rumble. For a Rumble rant, from Game On Podcast. Good guys over there. Go check out Game On Sports. Says KC team total under 29.5 tomorrow night. Lock it in. Great show, guys. Hey, thank you, man. I appreciate that. And we will. That's undoubtedly one of the games we'll get to, which if you got the Lions at, I don't know, 7.5, whatever that spread was, you're pretty happy now with some of the things that are coming out when it comes to Chris Jones, when it comes to Travis Kelce, but we'll get to NFL. Let's start off with some of the previews for this week, Robert. Might as well just talk about it now. You just talked about Nebraska, Colorado. Very interesting coaching matchup. Deion Sanders coming out this big win against Matt Rule and this new look Nebraska team.
Yeah, the curse of Scott Frost seems to continue to hang over the Cornhuskers as they went in and utterly dominated Minnesota. The post-game win expectancy was about 95% for Nebraska. They out from a yard per play perspective, they should have won by 17 points, and yet they lost. And that's something that Nebraska's been doing for half a decade, ever since Scott Frost showed up. So a little bit unlucky for Matt Rule. Now, their defense looked good. Running game looked good. Jeff Sims, the transfer quarterback from Georgia Tech, ran the ball well, but made big mistakes, which was his modus operandi with the Yellow Jackets as well. Now, you look at Colorado, their run defense there isn't much. Their talent is entirely in the secondary, where they got Travis Hunter, where they have two other NFL prospects, where they have Deion Sanders' son at safety. So if Nebraska, this will be interesting. This is a game that started out Nebraska favored by 7 just a couple of weeks ago. And now it's Colorado by 3. And the public is so hyped and so psyched for Coach Prime coming back after that big win to Boulder. And apparently the fans are too. Apparently it's going to be a sellout. First time in about half a decade. Even though they've always had good fan base, the fans are going to be absolutely berserk with Deion in his cowboy hat riding out there with the Buffalo. Mimicking his ad campaign with Nick Saban. It's going to be a wild crowd. They're going to be on a high. Now, generally, when teams pull big upsets as 20-point or bigger underdogs, they usually go home and blow it the next week. I don't think Colorado's going to do that. I think they're going to maintain the high. The question is whether this spread adjustment is a reflection of where Colorado and Nebraska are as teams, or a little bit overrated response to all the media hype that came with that big Colorado victory. I think if Nebraska's smart, they will not let Sims throw the ball much. Definitely not against Travis Hunter. TCU figured that out. They figured it out belatedly. The idiot announcer was saying, I would pick on Hunter. He's playing so many snaps. And then Hunter went and picked the pass off.
Goes and picks off, yeah.
Two more off. So it's like, no, it's just like Deion. You don't throw against that side. You just run the ball is what TCU should have done. If Nebraska will just run the ball, they can control the clock. They can limit the total number of possessions. New rules in college football. The clock doesn't stop until the last 2 minutes. And consequently, the games are shortening and the scores are coming down. But it especially helps running teams take away possessions from pass-happy teams like Colorado wants to be. So we'll see how good Matt Rule is. Only 10% of the public is betting with him. Everybody's hammering him. The bookies are so confident in this line, they won't move it, even though 90% is pouring in on the Buffaloes. Personally, my power ratings have it as Colorado -3. I mean, I adjusted after. I thought Colorado would be weak this year, but not bad. I thought they'd make a huge upgrade. I thought they'd be 20 points better than last year. That still made them 10 points worse than average. I think they're average. That's what they proved. I think Nebraska's average. With Jeff Sims, you're never going to have a reliable passing game. The defense he's upgraded fast. And a lot of people thought Matt Rule would be rebuilding like he did at Baylor, like he did at Temple, only one win in his first seasons. This is another, just like Colorado on the other side, this is another transfer portal team. The transfer portal can help coaches that are down on their luck or new to a program radically change the nature of that program in ways that usually took several seasons to recruit their players. Now they can recruit them right out of the gate. While Nebraska didn't use it quite like Colorado did, they still brought in 20-plus quality transfers, and they showed up defensively. That was a bad defensive team last year for Nebraska. That was a very good Nebraska team that showed up against Minnesota. That while Minnesota's had its own turnover, they basically just crushed Minnesota offensively. I don't think they'll have the same success against Colorado. I mean, that offensive scheme that Kent State former coach has is very tough to stop, very creative, very smart, but very simple for offensive players to execute. And the skill guys are legit at Colorado. But if Nebraska's smart, comes in with a real smart game plan, tries to suck up all the clock, take out all the oxygen, don't let Sims make a mistake by throwing the ball, just run like mad, then they can play a protective defense that takes away Colorado's run game, creates a little more pressure than TCU was able to do. And then I could easily see Nebraska pulling the upset. But I think it's going to be actually a fun, exciting, tight game with two first-year coaches at their programs with very different styles. And I think it will be a coaching matchup. Whoever comes in with a better game plan, I think wins that game.
Yeah, I certainly don't think we're going to see another 500-yard performance from Shedeur Sanders, right? But I just think when you look at the talent level on the offensive side of the ball for Colorado, it is incredibly legit. This is not a Big 12 defense. This is a Big 10 defense that they're about to face. But I just think that they went on the road. They went to TCU. They had a lot to prove. And I still think that Dion is going to have them feeling like they have a lot to prove. Yes. I think he's going to be really good at motivating those guys. And now talking about, hey, this is not just to show or change. This is to show that we're up here. And so I think that 3-point spread, I get why they don't want to change it because it's so drastically different, but I'm surprised it hasn't creeped up to more with all the money pouring in on it and with all that talent on that side of the ball. But there's no doubt it's going to be rocking in Colorado when Nebraska comes. And Matt Rule, again, this is a guy who had so much success at Baylor. Really, I think, hurt his reputation a lot, his stint in the NFL. Some guys it hurts worse than others. I think it really hurt his. And he's got a lot to do. It's not easy to get people to come to Nebraska. Not anymore, anyway. So
no doubt
see
about
what happens.
But I think it may be one of the most, like the first week, one of the most exciting games on the board.
Yeah, Nebraska's hoping that it's exciting for them because if it's going to be a blowout, it's only going to be one way, in my opinion. I don't see Nebraska able to run away with it with their, trouble issues at quarterback. That's how we'll put it, I guess. Their issues at quarterback, but they're going to hope to keep it tight the whole time. But we'll see. What's next up on the docket for college football?
So, another matchup of a Pac-12 team leaving the Pac-12 for the Big 12, which is Utah, who took care of Florida last week at home in Salt Lake City, travels to Waco, Texas, where Baylor was the other team to get to lose with a huge favorite. They were 28-point favorites against Texas State and lost outright at home. Those kind of upsets happen usually once every 2 years, and we had two of them in 1 week, in week one. So now Baylor, Utah, nobody knows whether the quarterback Cameron is going to be able to play or not. I'm skeptical that he's going to be able to play. They tried to pretend he was going to play last week, and he didn't even suit up. They say he's been cleared for practice this week, so maybe he'll go out there. Baylor's got the same problem. Their starting quarterback also out for several weeks. And it'll be an interesting matchup because you have Utah coming off a big primetime win, Baylor coming off a disastrous debacle at home, both teams with quarterback questions. And so consequently, this spread jumped from Utah -3 to Utah -7.5 as we speak, even on the road. Utah has not been under Whittingham a good road favorite, generally speaking. They have a great home field advantage, and usually they get a little overvalued when the bettors start pumping them up for road venues against quality foes. Baylor's been very good under this coach as a underdog at home. But still, another game where it's lopsided action. Currently, 93% of the bets are coming in on the Utes. So if you wanted to fade the public, Baylor would be the pick. Sharp money appears to be staying away from the game due to the injury issues at quarterback and due to the fact that everybody was kind of blown away that Baylor made TJ Finley look like a star for Texas State. Because that was a legitimate Texas State win. There was nothing fluky about it at all. I think they averaged 10 yards per attempt. It was just the stat sheet just screamed at you. And particularly if Utah's quarterback does come back, that quarterback is worth 6 to 7 points to Utah. So Utah's pass defense was a real weakness last year. It showed problems against Graham Mertz in the second half against Florida. Florida just couldn't punch it in when they got into scoring range. Their run defense was pretty solid. The question is, Baylor's backup is a transfer from the SEC who was a 4-star high school recruit. So he has potential, and he flashed bits of it against Texas State, but only saw limited action after their quarterback went down. So I think it's a game that was anticipated before the season to be a very exciting, interesting game. Yeah. Right now, people are thinking the Utes are going to roll. I think it'll end up being a very, Dave Aranda's teams have a great capability to rebound. And I think they got embarrassed so bad at home against Texas State. I don't think they let that happen second week in a row. But big questions about Baylor. Maybe Baylor's just on the downslide, and we'll find out pretty soon with the Utah providing that challenge.
I think there's a good chance, too, that this is a team that was looking to this week. It was preparing for this week, that was not worried about their opener. They took it for granted a little bit. And that's obviously a coaching. That's natural for players to do. But as a coach, you got to make sure that you focus your guys on what you have. But this undoubtedly was the game they were looking towards. Probably in all likelihood thought this game, win or lose, could really affect the course of the rest of their season. Now they're sitting there at 0-1, didn't expect to be. And it really is when you're in that Big 12 picture. We know oftentimes Big 12 gets left out of some of these, not last year, but sometimes they get left out of this conversation for national championship. And Baylor's going to have to show up against Utah for this to happen. Real quick, big shout out to Eric Stratton, becomes a channel member, then gives 5 Sports Wars memberships. Appreciate that, Eric. Thank you. And we still got our peeps over on Rumble too. What do we got next on the line for college football?
A team that's getting a lot of hype, like Colorado, like Utah, even though all they've beaten are 2 lower teams this year, which are the Catholics from Notre Dame. Traveled down to North Carolina State and play the Wolfpack, coming off a disappointing, more narrow victory than the bettors expected against UConn. The Wolfpack have their new offensive coordinator, a new quarterback, and people thought it'll be back to being exciting. And it looked a lot like your typical NC State offense, which was very conservative and very limited, at least against UConn. But maybe that's because they knew they could get a win without showing much in anticipation of getting Notre Dame at home. You have trends competing against each other here. Notre Dame has basically owned the ACC the last several years in college football. But NC State has been a live dog anytime they're a big dog at home for the last decade or so under this coaching staff. And it may have been they were just holding back a little, not that they've slipped a little talent-wise at key positions or that they'll necessarily be as conservative offensively as they showed. In particular, this defensive unit and coaching staff knows Sam Hartman very well. That was Wake Forest's offense that they were watching, not Notre Dame's offense. But they basically gave Hartman nightmares when he was at Wake Forest. Usually his worst game of the year was when he faced NC State. So the question is, how much was that specific to Hartman or specific to the Wake Forest scheme? We're going to find out. Notre Dame favored by 7.5, total at 51. The public, it's another lopsided public game. Everybody's hammering the over, and they're another 90% plus betting Notre Dame. Because what people remember is, wow, Notre Dame whooped up on Navy. That's a Navy team going through some transitions. But they skipped that, and it was in Dublin. You know, the Catholics really couldn't lose in Dublin. And then
it's not a Charlie Weiss coach team, so.
Yeah, exactly. And then you look at the Wolfpack, and they underperformed against UConn. People are remembering a UConn team that's been bad for about a decade, but it's actually been getting better. It was starting to get better last year. It's actually a decent little team. What Jim Moore Jr. is building there. So I think I think they didn't show a lot. But they're so excited about having a real quarterback, probably I was never a big Ian Book fan, probably the best quarterback at Notre Dame. And, maybe since the days of Lou Holtz, you could argue, in terms of Notre Dame with Sam Hartman. But there's a reason why he stayed in college and never got drafted and never went to the NFL. It's because people had doubts when they did a scouting analysis of how much his performance was, the uniqueness of Dave Clawson's Wake Forest scheme versus his physical skill set. There's a great opportunity for him to show that, put him in a pro scheme, he can excel against the defense he's always had trouble with. But I think the spread is a little high. This is another one. If you want to fade the public, you take the Wolfpack. Though there's no evidence of any sharp money yet coming in on the Wolfpack at home, but there might be later in the year because they tended to be, or later in the week, they tend to be a sharp money favorite. But sharp money got burned a little bit last year on them. So we'll see if that continues. But and we'll see, is Notre Dame deserving of this top 10 rating?
I can tell you right now, no. They are never deserving of a top 10 rating. Notre Dame's historically so overrated. Doesn't matter who's coach, doesn't matter what players they have, year after year after year. They continue to get all this credit in the preseason and early games when they're playing nobodies with their, mediocre strength of schedule, and they will eventually let everyone down. But that's just me speaking as someone who grew up about 45 minutes from campus and despises Notre Dame. So
Exactly.
might have a little bias.
Understandable. But and that leads us to the two big games on the TV schedule this week in our preview of the top 5 college football games this week. A game that was, from two disappointing teams last year, but was a fun, tight, but boring game, a defensive-oriented game last year, as the Aggies traveled down to the U. You look at this game, and I think both of these teams are undervalued going into this year. A&M, from a pure talent perspective, is one of only 4 teams with 20 or more players in their 2 deep that are on NFL draft boards as we speak. The other 3 are Alabama, Georgia, and Ohio State. Last year, they badly underperformed on offense. Defense was actually quite good, as Jimbo Fisher just couldn't adjust with modern changes in the offensive schemes. He wasn't getting explosive. He wasn't getting downfield. He wasn't getting vertical, and it wasn't working. To his credit, after having a disastrous losing season, after having the greatest recruiting class in college football history, he goes out and gets Bobby Petrino. And, Bobby might have some mistresses on the side or what have you, but he's always been a good offensive coordinator.
Keep him off those motorcycles,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's something about Arkansas and motorcycles. But Brett Bielema goes down there and he just kept eating barbecue and hasn't quit, and barely survived against the Rockets of Toledo at home last week. But Bobby Petrino got into a little bit of trouble. But now he's back, and he runs simplified offensive schemes that are particularly well suited for the college game. And Wigman, they put up more points in a half than they put up all year last year. Now, it was New Mexico, but this is an improving New Mexico team. And the key was how he did it. He did it with vertical passes. He threw 6 passes over 20 yards. He hit on 4 of them, and 3 went for touchdowns. They have a legit elite wide receiver core, solid offensive line, good running backs, very talented defense, a little bit questionable in the secondary where they've had some transfer issues. And that might be tested by a Miami team. Cristobal got a lot of heat, deservedly so. 1-10 against the spread in his first season. Losing year, disastrous game at home. Lost to MTSU last year. The Blue Raiders that went into the U and beat them. When Miami has been a good resurgent program at night on national TV, when the fans actually show up and aren't hanging out in the beach like they are most Miami games, that is a raucous crowd, and that is a fun Miami team that has a history of pulling big upsets. And you look at this, they brought in a new offensive coordinator, one of the best offensive coordinators in the game. We'll go out and bring the best, in my view, defensive coordinator in the game, who had been sort of hidden at places like McNeese State, elsewhere, finally got a good gig at Marshall. What does he do? He just defensively dominates college football statistically. Now he gets to play around with Miami's talent, which Cristobal, for all the criticism of him, no one's ever criticized him for not being able to recruit. So he's got the talent on the offensive side and defensive side. They went out and got a JUCO wide receiver that a lot of people missed on, that showed up big in the first week against Miami of Ohio, that was pretending to be the real U. And they got smacked around.
That didn't work very well.
No, hey, Brad, go talking smack to Miami, going to Miami when you're Miami of Ohio, probably not the best idea. It was little brother really got beat up by big brother. But they dominated that game defensively. They already show they can bring pressure from lots of different angles. And offensively, you put Van Dyke in an offense that's designed for him, and they bring in 2 quality receivers, including, I think, an elite first-round prospect and this JUCO kid who people just miss somehow. He's 6'4", 215, runs a sub 4.5, and he was just torching those defenses. I mean, that's you don't see many receivers ever fit that these days. Yeah. They tend to be small, little scat guys, not these big, physical, fast, old school style receivers. And he's got an offense designed for him. They got some of the best offensive line recruits in the country already playing. And that's Cristobal's strength, is building good offensive lines. So I think this is a game that a lot of people kind of snoozed on a little bit because of how both these teams so badly underachieved last year. Spread's only Texas A&M by 4.5. It's dropped from 7 to 4.5 between the offseason and now. And I think that's legitimate. I think it's going to be a very tight game. And I think these are 2 teams that are underrated. So I think this is one of the better matchups in college football. And I always like it when you have a resurgent U playing at home in a big TV game.
Yeah, when it comes to Jimbo and this A&M team that was such a huge disappointment, they're paying him a lot of money. They got, I think it's isn't it like a 10-year extension or something they did with him?
Yeah, they can't fire him because it would cost them like $200 million.
That's what I was going to say. Is there a leash for Jimbo after that really disappointing year? If he does the same thing, if he repeats this year, I don't know if they have enough money to be able to fire him, to be honest with you. But do you think there's any type of leash at all, or is it just Jimbo for the next couple of years regardless?
I don't think he goes out and hires Petrino unless he felt pressure, though I think most of the pressure he felt was pride rather than money. I think he knew that A&M would give him at least 2 more years. And if he had 2 more years of losing seasons, then he'd be fired for sure at A&M. They would just eat the money because they got enough big donors to afford it. But they were really locked in otherwise. And Jimbo Fisher's a guy that, against Miami, 8-1, going back to his Florida State days. And if you look at Fisher, he doesn't have, I bet him on week 1 because the man always covers big spreads. And by golly, he covered it again. But he tends to step up when people expect the least of him. That even happened at times last year, pulling some upsets down the stretch. So I think it's LSU. When LSU was heading to the SEC title game. So I think the fact he went out and finally broke what the analytics community had been saying now for half a decade was that Fisher's old offensive schemes weren't upgrading to the new explosive style vertical offenses, and he refused to buckle until he had to buckle. But, you go out and get Bobby Petrino. That's one of the best offensive coordinators in the country. And credit to Mario Cristobal. He recognized I hired 2 bad coordinators. Both gone. I'm going to go out and hire the best. That's what he does. And I think it's gone under the radar because of just how bad they were last year. And so people kind of soured on Jimbo. And through most of his career, Jimbo's been a very good coach. People were worried at A&M that they were going down the Florida State route, that after Jimbo had all that success, their culture sort of started to get into problems. Then they started to slide. He mostly adjusted that by letting the bad character, questionable character guys go, or guys that just didn't match the culture go. He let them go in the transfer portal. But he went out and replaced them with some other quality transfers. And so that receiving core is stacked. You're going to see a ton of NFL talent on the field on Saturday in that game. And I'm just hoping it lives up to what the hype of what it could be.
It definitely could be a monster game. And now the last one, which is another big rematch we have here, and that is Texas heading to Tuscaloosa. Now, obviously, last year, again, early on in the season, Alabama somehow escapes at Texas. I think the final score is 21-20 or 20-19, something like that. And really, you almost could have considered it a loss for Alabama, just the effect that had on that team and what people expected. Is it any different this year at home, Alabama? What's your take on what's going to happen here?
Yeah, Alabama favored by 7. It's jumped up to 7.5, as about 2/3 of the cash is coming in on the Tide. Probably some of that reflects Texas being overvalued for the last decade on the road. They have lost when they have been an underdog on the road for the last decade. They've failed to cover 2/3 of the time, and lost more than 2/3 of the time. Alabama as a favorite, a single-digit favorite, has been very, very dominant at home, though it's very rare that they are one under the Nick Saban era. The real question, I think, is at quarterback. Now, last year, I was at that game in Austin. Quinn Ewers goes down in the first quarter. It looks doomed for Texas, and instead, they're leading late in the game, and they needed a last-second Bryce Young comeback for a last-second field goal to eke it out there in Austin. The question with Quinn Ewers in Texas has been their offensive line doesn't hold up well against pressure, and Quinn Ewers has been erratic in his vertical passing game that Sarkisian really loves and needs to explode to be dominant, like it was when he was OC at USC and OC at Alabama. You have the whole history of the curse, that former Saban assistants, until Jimbo Fisher won one 2 years ago, and until Coach Richt won it for Georgia a year ago or so. He had been undefeated against his former assistants. I'll give Sark credit. He had a good answer. And they asked him that on, I think it was Fox or ESPN, one of them. He was like, well, tell me Nick Saban's record against every other coach that's not his former assistant. So
yeah, exactly.
That was a good line by Sarkisian. I think he'll have his team prepared. He's one of the smartest coordinators out there. Now, the other thing I thought Alabama radically upgraded both their coordinator positions. I've never been a Bill O'Brien fan. I've never understood the hype. I get he had a few good years. He coached Tom Brady at New England. That doesn't count. He did well for a couple of years, Penn State, when they were in trouble. He was anybody that followed him, it drove you nuts how he screwed up games with the Texans. And you looked at Alabama, they were terrible on the road, but only terrible under the road while Bill O'Brien was their offensive coordinator.
I think the most impressive thing about Bill O'Brien's Texans tenure was that he was able to like have the most like mediocre of mediocre success with some of the worst possible talent at the quarterback position. You know what I mean? Like just people that could not make a roster ended up starting for him, and somehow they'd still be in the running, at the 12 or 13 week point to potentially win the South.
Well, that and he had a constant line of masseuses for Deshaun Watson. So I think now I'm not a big Tommy Rees fan. Comes over as offensive coordinator, though he may be from Notre Dame, though he may be a good fit for this precise quarterback and what Saban wants to do. Big upgrade on the defensive coordinator side. That had been a weak link for Alabama for years, ever since Rick left. And now I think they're going to be back to an elite, dominating, suffocating style defense. And this will be a great matchup because, Sarkisian has a way of taking apart even the best defenses with sophisticated schemes. And he's got the wide receivers and the quarterback to do it. And if there's any issues with Ewers, I mean, his number 3 on his roster is Arch Manning. It's not like he lacks quarterback talent there.
Arch Manning can start making some of that $2 million in NIL or whatever.
Exactly. I don't think being third was the original intention, but we'll see how that develops and how that goes. I mean, he like his uncles, he may in fact be somebody who benefits from sitting back a year, like Peyton Manning did in part, like Eli also did. But I think so. The big question was Alabama's quarterback. I thought Milroe was a major step down from the ridiculous run of quarterbacks they've had now for a decade there in Tuscaloosa. The receivers are not like those crazy elite receivers that Sarkisian had that just tore up college football for several seasons. But they've designed an offensive scheme that's very run heavy, uses Milroe's excellent running ability, a lot of RPOs, and then just throws the ball deep. And he throws however they've trained it or worked, he throws a beautiful deep ball. I mean, they're up 14-0 with 2 minutes left. 5 minutes into the second half, they're up 35-0. And it was just bomb, bomb, bomb. And he dropped it right in the breadbasket. He showed the ability not just to have a strong arm, not a Joe Milton, just always everything vertical and strong, but with soft touch in key positions and right locations. So that's a good schematic matchup against Texas. So it wouldn't surprise me if this game that's anticipated to be a fun rematch of last year gets out of hand early. If, in fact, it's just a bad schematic matchup for Texas with their problematic offensive line, Ewers struggling throwing the ball vertical and deep, which may be the only weakness of Alabama's defense, and if Milroe really matches up well against that Texas defense. Their ability to run Alabama all year, if they can't run the ball, they'll be in trouble. If they can run the ball, the other side's going to be in trouble. Now, once again, like Notre Dame, like Colorado, like Utah, 2/3 of the money's come pouring in on Bama, and some smart money early on came in on Bama. So it's a place where the sharps and the squares, the Joes and the pros seem to concur that they think that this Texas team, and again, the spread has really radically moved. If this game had been last year, the spread would have been 27 or 28 for Alabama. Yeah. And the question is it really? It was always too high last year. I bet heavily on Texas in that game. But this probably should be. A lot of computer systems have this game Alabama by 13. They see it as that there's too much of it. And from a pure talent perspective, Alabama is definitely a tier above Texas.
It's shocking that it's only 7 and you can get it for 7 right now at home, Alabama. And 100% last year's playing a big role in that. But it's a different Alabama team. Doesn't have Bryce Young at quarterback anymore as well. So if you didn't have Bryce Young in Austin last year, they lose that game in all likelihood. So
instead, Bryce Young is going to be on the field with 2 other rookies to start the NFL season.
Yes, and we will We'll see how that goes for him in Carolina. There's a lot of options for who's going to be the worst team in the league this year in the NFL. But we might as well get started on the NFL. Big shout out to Fear the Hammers becomes a channel member. Thank you very much. But when it comes to the NFL, we got to talk about the first game, which happens tomorrow night, which the spread was a little bit different a couple days ago. It doesn't look like Chris Jones is going to be playing for the Chiefs, and Travis Kelce is now questionable after an injury in practice to his knee. But it is going to be the Detroit Lions coming off an impressive year last year. We'll just put it that way, an impressive year for the Detroit Lions facing the defending Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs in Arrowhead.
And I think the effect of the Mahomes quality, which is that the Chiefs, ever since they won their first Super Bowl, has come up short against spreads of 4 or more. So I think has burned a lot of bettors. And Jared Goff, even when he's at the Rams, was really good in week 1 against the number. And as you note, that offensive coordinator revolutionized and revitalized Goff's career. And the Lions look like, a playoff contender for the first time in forever. So I think, and yeah, you're right. The injuries immediately dropped the Chiefs from, hitting right around 7 to now hovering right above 4. Total at 53. I mean, that total has come down. It was like 56, 57, trending toward 58. As soon as they hear Kelce's out, bam. It shows the betting market's respect for Travis Kelce that the line moves 2.5 points, though also Chris Jones. But you know how much it's Kelce because the total takes a nosedive.
And that's wild for a tight end. For a tight end to be valued that much is pretty crazy. But I mean, this is a dude who's very important to what they do. There's no doubt.
And so it's a lot of people's favorite bet is take Chiefs on the money line and Lions on the points because Mahomes has had this weird ability to win but not cover if the spread's 4 or more. So the still 2/3 of the public is the tickets are coming in on Kansas City because they're looking Kansas City Super Bowl winner. At home, Andy Reid, week 1, they gotta whip up on those Lions. But a lot of other folks, a lot of handicappers and professionals, like not so much smart money, but people that are closer to it, if you will, are on the Lions side of this equation, this big Thursday night matchup. I think the line is about right. I am really what I'm most curious about. Mahomes going to be Mahomes. Reed's going to be Reed. Offense going to be fine. Defense going to be solid. Missing Chris Jones is critical because it's such an anchor to their defensive team. Kelce is the guy who bails him out and makes all the plays. So without him, you could take away a possession or two. You could see not becoming scoring because of Kelce's absence if he's absent. But Mahomes is still Mahomes. I would never want to bet against him at home on opening night coming off a Super Bowl win with that crazy Kansas City Chiefs crowd. And I can't yet pull the trigger on the Lions just because I'm still curious how much was last year something that they can replicate and repeat given Jared Goff's history of not being able to, especially on the road, not being able to repeat and replicate in back-to-back years of prior season's performance. That's what led to his decline with the Rams is after they made it to the Super Bowl the next year on the road. He was still good at home, but on the road,
figured him out a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, so that I'm curious to see how that works. So I don't even have a lean on the game, but I am interested to watch it because I'm curious. Not so much. I think we know what the Chiefs are. I'm more curious about can the Lions maintain and sustain that momentum from last season.
And the Kelce thing is big because the Lions really want to play man defense. They really want to play man defense. That's what they excelled at last year. Travis Kelce eats defenses up when you have to play man, right? You need to play his zone if you want to be able to contain Kelce because there's only a couple guys in the NFL that have the size and the speed and the agility on the defensive side of the ball, all those things combined to cover Kelce. And when you don't have to play man, you don't have to worry about that monster in the middle of the field. That plays right into what the Lions want to do. 100% is going to be a lot of people watching this game. It's going to be very exciting. Let's get to the next NFL game. And I guess, we should probably talk about about my Chicago Bears. Aaron Rodgers no longer in Green Bay, which means he's given up his partial ownership of the Chicago Bears, dominated them during his tenure there. But now Jordan Love has officially taken over. And to be honest, people have been talking pretty highly about him in terms of the way he looks, the way he's running that offense, the weapons he's still got there in Green Bay. This is a big year for the Chicago Bears. Justin Fields getting so much hype, even though it's a team that had the number 1 draft pick and gave it up for basically spare change and a wide receiver. So how do you see this game going? I know for me as a Bears fan, I'm very worried about all the hype that is going on in Chicago this season, and I don't think they're going to live up to it. But this is a big statement game for them. Green Bay Packers rivalry at Soldier Field.
No doubt. The Bears, are they the back? We will soon find out. I mean, I think the hype in the Bears has been high. They're favored by 1 at home, and the public is pouring in money on the Bears. Not fully believing in Jordan Love, believing in the Bears despite a lot of their offensive line issues that they've had over in the preseason. I mean, I think the defense is upgraded for the Bears. I don't think it will be the sieve that it was last season. I personally am not yet. I'll believe in Jordan Love when I see it. Now, on paper, Love better fits the Packers style than Rodgers did. It's the kind of offense that they actually want to run. They want an athletic quarterback who can bootleg and do a lot of things that wasn't really Rodgers' game. And some of those receivers that were new last year are broken in a little bit better this year. And so this is a game I'm very interested in because are the Bears better? And will the Packers be able to survive the loss of Aaron Rodgers? Did they make the same adjustment? You know, they had such confidence in Rodgers, they let Favre go. Did they make the same right move in letting Rodgers go for Jordan Love? I personally am skeptical of it, but I know a lot of smarter handicappers that like the Packers, and that's why that line is so tight in Soldier Field. Probably also the history, though, as you note, that history is directly tied to Aaron Rodgers, and before that, Brett Favre. You go back before that, it was the Bears who often owned the Packers, not the other way around, unless you go all the way back to the 1960s. So I think it'll be a fun game, great rivalry game, and a very educational game. How much better is Justin Fields? How much better is the Bears defense? And how much of a drop-off are the Packers going to experience from Rodgers to Love?
Yeah, at the end of the day, Justin Fields can run for 1,000 yards. He can pass for, we'll see, 3,000, whatever it ends up being. If that Bears defense is as bad as it was last year, it's not really going to matter all that much. That defense was atrocious. And with Eberflus there, a guy who had such a great run with that Colts defense, that is his baby. That is what he is there for. He needs to get that figured out. They drafted a lot of defensive guys. I don't know how much better this defense is than last year. I think you gave your inside linebacker a shit ton of money, but you still downgraded the position because you let Roquan Smith walk away, who is definitively better. One of the best linebackers in the league. So I don't know. I am a Bears fan, which means I am as skeptical as possible at everything. I never want to get my hopes too high, and I would never dream of betting on my team because I have learned that lesson one too many times. But it is a very important start to the season for both of these teams and both of these young quarterbacks. There's no doubt about that.
Well, one of the biggest sharp square divides of the week, the Joes and the pros, is the folks betting on Belichick bouncing back as they host the Super Bowl losers, Philadelphia Eagles.
Yeah, I think that, listen, Mac Jones, we've seen Mac Jones' rookie year, then we saw the second year. People are wondering, which Mac Jones are we going to see? And when you look at that division now, things have changed a little bit. Over the past 4 or 5 years, things have changed when it comes to that AFC East. New England, arguably the worst team. And I don't even think it's that arguable. When you look at Miami, when you look at Buffalo, when you look at the New York Jets. And so now you have Bill Belichick. Tom Brady's no longer a thought in anyone's head. He's retired, hanging out on the Raiders sideline, hanging out with Jimmy G, I guess, in Vegas. But is Belichick going to be able to bounce back this year against, starting off with a team that was in the Super Bowl that still feels very hungry?
I mean, the betting public doesn't think so. It's one of the most lopsided bets of the entire week in the NFL. Almost 85% of the bets are coming in on the Philadelphia Eagles. They remember the thing, maybe some coordinators are gone, but this is the team that was within inches of winning the Super Bowl. And as you note, a Patriots team that has not frankly looked very good since Tom Brady left. And some people wondering how much of Belichick's success was Tom Brady's success, not Belichick. I think this season's going to tell us. Now, the reason why sharp money is on the Patriots is they believe in Belichick. And that's because Belichick has been one of the biggest ticket cashers in the NFL, especially as a home underdog during his entire coaching career, both before and after Tom Brady. So they're 4-point underdogs at home to the Eagles. It may get as high in some spots. You can get it 4 and a hook, which is a valuable number since 5 is usually a dead number in the NFL. So that has a lot of temptation for the sharp bettors out there, but the squares absolutely think the Pats are not improved, despite the fact that at least this year, Belichick decided maybe I should have an offensive coordinator that's actually offensive, not offensive like it was last season. So we're going to find out. And then how much was the Eagles the product of some really creative coordinators versus how much the product that they just have the right talent and the right scheme and the right system that anybody can go out there and execute. You give Belichick a whole offseason to figure it out and decipher it. We're going to find out real fast. It's one of the more intriguing matchups aside from the sharp square divide for that very reason. What does Belichick come up with defensively? And is that offense back to being at least decent now that it has an actual offensively capable offensive coordinator?
Well, in my opinion, the key to beating the Eagles is to score first, right? If you can put the Eagles in a pass first scenario, you're going to beat them because that's not what Jalen Hurts does. It's not what he does very well. We saw that in the Super Bowl, right? Like if you put the Eagles in a situation where in all likelihood they are going to pass, you don't have to put up with the RPO stuff. You don't have to put up with all the little I'll just say bullshit, the bullshit scheming to get just a little extra windows for these wide receivers and a little bit easier throws for Jalen Hurts. If you put him in traditional passing scenarios, he is not very efficient. We'll just put it that way. Now the question is, can that happen with that Eagles defense, with this Eagles running game? It's easier said than done to get 10 points up on the Eagles, but that's the way you beat them. We'll just see if Mac Jones and, I say it with a little disgust just because I don't know how much faith I got in Mac Jones at this point in time, but we'll see if Mac Jones and a new look offense can get it done for the Patriots.
Yeah, can somebody do for him what Miami did for Tua in revitalizing an ex-Alabama quarterback's career? Now that leads to one of the biggest rivalry matchups, another big primetime game, and the quarterback that is one of those trivia question answers. Who's the quarterback that has the longest longevity on the same team currently in the NFL? It would be, but maybe there's a reason for that. It would be Dak Prescott. The Dallas Cowboys traveled to the New York Football Giants, and the Cowboys are coming in at 3-point favorites. Public's almost evenly split on the game. The Giants always catch plenty of public betting typically, but so do the Cowboys. And it's in a total of 46.5. And it's an interesting, the Giants being home underdogs coming off that playoff appearance last year against a Cowboys team that got rid of their offensive coordinator. So we're going to see how much that was the issue. I have doubts that was the issue. I'm not a Mike McCarthy fan. But we'll see. I think it'll be Sunday night tends to be Cowboys Giants in New York, tends to be a fun game. And it's fascinating that we have back-to-back primetime games in New York to kick off the season.
I don't know how many times we've seen that in history, back-to-back games at MetLife Stadium. I'm not sure. We'd have to go and check. ESPN fact checkers, go look at that for us. But yeah, this is, when everybody looked at the Trey Lance deal with Jerry Jones and they thought it's a little weird, I think more than anything, it might have just been a message to Dak, by not talking to him about it and just saying, hey, I paid you, but I'm not afraid to move off you if that's what we need to do. This is Jerry Jones. This is the Cowboys. I think they made a mistake when they paid him. Of course, that contract doesn't necessarily look as bad now since, 8 or 10 other quarterbacks have got paid ridiculous amounts since Dak got that contract. But they have paid out a lot of money to a lot of these key players, especially on the defensive side of the ball over the last couple weeks and months. And I think a lot's riding on this season for Dallas. It seems like that's always the case. Let's just be real. This is the Dallas Cowboys. But, going playing the Giants and a Daniel Jones who also got paid, a Saquon who got paid, all these things. I don't know what to expect from the Giants, to be honest with you. And I never know what to expect from Dak Prescott. But if Dak puts up another performance like he did last year in terms of interception, leading the league in interceptions, despite only playing 12 or 13 games, he cannot do that this year. And Cowboys fans, I think, have seen enough of Dak at this point.
Yeah, I think it is a do or die year for Dak. Well, the final Monday night game, also in New York, on September 11th, the New York Football Jets host the Buffalo Bills. And with a new quarterback by the name of Aaron Rodgers. In my view, if you wanted a futures bet, I still like Aaron Rodgers as MVP as long as he's getting better than 10-1. My futures Super Bowl bet would be the New York Football Jets. You can still get them at better than 15-1, as high at 20-1 in some sports betting markets. And we'll have at the end of the show our survivor pick and free pick of the year. Last year, our best bets were profitable almost all year long here on Sports Wars. So hopefully that continues as well. What's fascinating is I really thought the Jets, with as much hype, Hard Knocks and Aaron Rodgers, and it's New York, that there would be a lot of excitement for it in the betting markets. I know there is in the public. I know there is in the TV markets. But the Bills come in as almost 3-point favorites, 2.5-point favorites, and 2/3 of the money is pouring in on the Bills. A relatively low total for these quarterbacks, 46.5. And the money keeps coming in on the over, but somebody in Vegas really likes the under because whenever they try to push it up, it comes back down. So, they're predicting something like, 24 Bills, 22 Jets. I'd be really surprised. I think Aaron Rodgers last year was kind of an off year. I still think he's an elite quarterback. And now you put him with real wide receivers rather than some of the players he's kind of, been hit or miss there in Green Bay. Some very talented wide receivers, a very talented defense, back with the offensive coordinator that he has had success with before. I think this Jets team is undervalued. In fact, my free bet of the week is the New York Jets getting 2.5 points there in New York. I think they surprise the betting public. And of course, the hype is going to be insane if Rodgers leads them to a win on Monday night against a Super Bowl co-favorite Buffalo Bills.
Yeah, Aaron Rodgers in another uniform is going to be crazy. I'm going to love it. I'm glad that I don't just have to root against Aaron Rodgers every possible turn now. This is a team that when you look at last year, all they needed was a quarterback. That's all they needed. When you look at what that defense was able to do, when you look at some of the skill position players they had, a great draft that they had, when you look at basically one of the top wide receivers from the draft, and you got one of the top defensive backs from that draft. They both played lights out last year. And we get to see a little bit of that on Hard Knocks too. The addition of Dalvin Cook. All of a sudden you get one of, in my opinion, one of the top kind of dual threat running backs in the league with Dalvin Cook. If he can stay healthy, that's always kind of a question for him.
It kind of reminds me of like Tom Brady going to Tampa Bay, Brett Favre going to Minnesota, Peyton Manning going to Denver. These are quarterbacks with big egos, with a lot of confidence, who want to prove it was them. And the best way to prove in the modern era it's you is to go to another team and make them a Super Bowl contending team. And I think
pick your team, basically.
Yes.
That's what all those guys did, whether it was forced to trade or whatever. They picked their team based on what they thought, was the best fit. And we've seen that, and sometimes it works for teams, sometimes it doesn't. When you look at, say, the Tennessee Titans, over the last couple of years, if they could have just landed a quarterback there, things could have been different for the Titans. But instead, every year they threw Tannehill back out there. But this is a case where the Jets and a head coach that I like in Saleh, I like him. He's intense. He's got his players playing really hard. This is a moment where all the stars can align. And I think an MVP for Aaron Rodgers absolutely is right in the realm of possibilities because of the storyline, because of everything he's got to play for. No questions about is he or isn't he this year. He's all in, and he's got a lot to fucking prove. So we'll see what happens. On the opposite side for the Bills, big season for them. This might be a year where if they can't get past, the first or second round, if they don't make an AFC championship this year, I think you seriously see some big changes in Buffalo, whether that's a coaching change, whether they blow up some of the roster. And you're already starting to hear some people might be unhappy, with their roles there, wide receivers. So that's all the things that start to happen when you start to become this successful. Josh Allen on the cover of Madden, like all this stuff. This is a big year for them that could have big ramifications on the future of Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills the next couple of years.
Absolutely. To the survivor picks, those are the survivor leagues for the NFL.
I did want to say this too. We had a $20 super chat from Dom H that says, "Hey guys, what's 2 games you really like this week for Survivor Pool?" So it's the perfect opportunity. Appreciate you, Dom. Giants fan over there. So
I think the 2 most popular ones I can tell you is whoever Arizona is playing each week will be a favorite one. So the Commanders, or as I like to call them, the ex-Redskins, will be there. And then this week, it's whoever's got the biggest line, and it's Harbaugh at home with the Baltimore Ravens against a rookie coach with a rookie quarterback on the road in Baltimore. Now, Harbaugh's been very good in the opening week, but in the last several seasons, he's not been good as a big favorite. Early in his career, he hasn't been of late, and they're breaking in an entirely new offense. And I'm not yet sold that it was such a great idea to go away from that Lamar Jackson specific. I know it was Lamar who wanted it, but I really thought, ask Russell Wilson when you demand a offensive scheme change that you think proves how good you are, how that can work out. That can implode easier than it can explode. So, I look at, the other thing with survivor leagues is you're looking at who is the best bet for, you're trying to win the whole season. And so it depends on how much you just want to advance this week. You just pick whoever the best odds are that week versus, I want to save my bet for later on. Now, if you're just going to short Arizona all year, that gives you most of your season for survivor picks. Arizona justify. I would not, criticize a Commanders pick, but they are breaking in their own new quarterback. So I'm not yet quite sold on that as the best pick. There's going to be like Minnesota at home, but there's some question marks there, and maybe Tampa gives a fight earlier in the year. They may fall apart more later in the year with Baker Mayfield, but breaking in a new defense. So, you look at the big lines. You could take Seattle with Kupp out for the Rams.
That's what I was going to say. You look at that Seattle team with a Rams team that does not have Cooper Kupp. Who knows? It looks like he's seen a specialist and stuff like that. That's massive for a Rams team that was already behind the 8 ball a little bit. Cooper Kupp is one of the best receivers in the league. So 100%.
I think I would probably go with the Vegas favorite for best survivor, which is the Ravens. They're the biggest favorite just because it is Harbaugh at home. It is Ryans and his first coach. Now, rookie coaches have done well against the spread, but haven't won great on the road. And you combine a rookie coach with a rookie quarterback against Harbaugh, I think that's a bad combination for the Texans. I think they may hang in there and keep it close. But it's really hard for me to see Stroud and DeMeco Ryans going in there and beating Harbaugh and Lamar Jackson straight up.
Yeah, and like you said, it kind of depends on what your league looks like. If it's a league where you pick one guy and you pick one team and it's done, you can't ever pick them again, then I don't know if you have a better week for the Commanders than right now. I don't really know what their schedule looks like, but I'm not sure if you're ever going to see them favored by 7 points like that again, unless they really take off. So that's kind of where I would lean. But
yeah, those two make the most sense. I think Arizona may hang in there against Washington, but I like Dobbs. He's from Tennessee, but there's a reason why he's been on a lot of practice squads, and now he's a starting QB for an Arizona team that everybody thinks is deliberately trying to sink the season so they can get Caleb Williams out of USC and dump a very expensive contract with Kyler Murray next year. So if you think Arizona's deliberately sinking the season, and then betting against them every week is probably not a bad profitable strategy.
Yeah, it's always probably gonna be pretty good for you. Pizza is great for $1.99. Says great show. I'll watch each week you do these. And there you go. Well, the intention is to be here each and every Wednesday, 9 p.m. Eastern before the Thursday game. So obviously some schedule stuff sometimes comes up in over 4 months. But for right now, that's the plan. So we hope to see you guys here. Mr. Bubba Matt for 5. If my Bills don't win at all, it's back to square one. I think a lot of people feel that way. I did see somebody in the chat, I don't remember who it was like, good, keep doubting. The Bills play best when people doubt them or whatever.
Nobody
certainly
circles the wagons like the Buffalo Bills.
But certainly that's been proven because when people expect anything of the Bills, they tend to disappoint.
Yeah,
so
and right now the public's all on the Bills. It's not like anybody's doubting the Bills. Everybody thinks the Bills are going to go in and beat Aaron Rodgers in his home debut for New York.
Exactly. The Greg for 5. Welcome back, motherfuckers. Fire motherfucking Chip Kelly right now. Make UCLA great again.
San Diego State might be a live dog this week. We'll find out. I mean, San Diego State seems to be slipping, and UCLA does have a very talented true freshman quarterback, but they let Coastal Carolina, who's not that good this year after losing their coach, hang around way too long there in Pasadena last week.
Yeah. Well, we will see. We're excited that football is back. There's no doubt about that. And hopefully, you guys make a little bit of money from these suggestions. Robert, if people want all the picks that you guys have, everything, where do they go?
Sportspicks.locals.com. Last year, we had big 5% plays on the Super Bowl, the college football final, the college basketball final, the NBA finals, the World Cup final, and the Champions League final. 5% plays on all 6. We were a perfect 6-0. Made money on all the major sports last year. Made money on this for our subscribers 2 years running. And the average cost of the official picks is only 50 cents per pick. We give out over 100 picks every month, over 1,000 picks every year. We throw in some picks on movies, on sports, on politics, on economics to go with it. And you get lots of free picks. There's a bunch of people like Game On, people like Cricket and Cody, and a bunch of board members who give out their free picks, free advice. We do master classes explaining how sports betting works and the sports betting markets, and about 20, 25 years of lifetime and experience in it. So if you want the best value for sports handicapping information anywhere, you can get it at sportspicks.locals.com.
Yeah, and it's pretty cheap, and to just be part of the community too, if you're looking to get into sports betting and be around a bunch of other people who are, whether it's asking questions, watching games together, live chats, stuff like that, it's pretty cool, and there's a lot of value to it. Absolutely. I mean, just based off the biggest games of the year, with that kind of production, and obviously here on the free picks, almost undefeated when it comes to Sports Wars on the free picks of the week. So we will be back next week, same time. Daniel for $2 says Steelers might be the team to watch. Hey,
a lot of people like him. I mean, they're getting 2.5 points. Bosa apparently signed just in time to get the plane ride. So, I mean, you got TJ Watt on one side, Bosa on the other, though we're not sure which Bosa we're going to get. How ready is he since he's been out of, holding out for a while? Was Brock Purdy for real? Is Kenny Pickett?
That's the question.
Is George Pickens? I mean, people look at Mike Tomlin, great home underdog record covering the spread. But I broke down Brock Purdy, and I think if he'd been healthy, I don't think the Eagles even make the Super Bowl last year. And they clearly have enough confidence in him in San Fran that they did what we predicted they would do at the beginning of last year before they played the Bears. When we picked the Bears to upset San Francisco, first game of the year, said Trey Lance, overrated. Well, clearly 49ers think so. They've already jettisoned him from the entire roster. But how good is Brock Purdy? How good is Kenny Pickett? The Pickens connection, is that going to be a fun Steeler connection all year long? That's a game a lot of smart handicappers really like the Steelers. A lot of the betting public does too because of their preseason performance. So that should be a fun game. How good is Brock Purdy? How good is Kenny Pickett? And we may get a nice preview of that in week 1.
And honestly, like, regardless of how good is Brock Purdy, even that question, which is still unknown, right? Guy's got like 8 NFL games under his belt or something crazy like that. That injury, that's not an injury that everyone comes back 100% from. And if you just lose 15% of that arm strength, that's a massive deal. So we'll see how recovered he is from that injury he suffered last year. But that's it for us here at Sports Wars. Thank you to Robert Barnes from sportspicks.locals.com. We'll see you guys next week. Good luck on your bets, and happy football Sunday.